so good opportunity to talk about the vineyards and the wines and to share a bit of moment with that. So so it's just a shame that we are not able to do that this year. But I mean, everybody needs to adapt, and this COVID situation is just awful everywhere. So we just need to keep going and find new options to do that. So thank Averys to organize these masterclasses and these discussions and all that. So
that's quite right. And we were supposed to be doing a dinner in December with you as well, which sadly has been postponed until we can eventually do it.
Absolutely, just postponed. I hope so. So no problem.
Yeah, one day we'll be able to do it here in this cellar. Yeah. It won't just be me alone in this massive cellar.
Yeah, that's
I'll be there.
We'll welcome people back here one day.
Yeah.
Just for those of you just tuning in, welcome. We will be tasting both of these delicious Bordeaux in just a moment, so do feel free to open them up, get the cork out of those. You could decant them, which would help soften the tannins a little bit, but then you do sadly need to drink the rest of the bottle this evening, so not ideal. However, get them both in a glass, same as with the Castagno. Try and have 2 glasses for this, taste them side by side, get them swirling around your glass nice and good, and get that air in, and that will start to open them up as well. This is going to be another very interesting masterclass. Bordeaux is by far our most important wine region, and it's probably the most important one of the most important wine regions in the world. It's the vast majority of what we sell, and our customers and ourselves absolutely love Bordeaux wine, with such a rich history throughout the UK, but also our company as well. But it's such a large area that you can easily get quite lost within it. So it's really going to be great to learn a little bit more about it and how grapes, blends, regions and styles start to take effect. So over to you, Dorothy. I'm just going to shut up and let you talk about the wine.
No, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I think it's before starting with the tasting of the 2 wines we have planned tonight, which are the Château Muret Côte de Bourg and the Château Muret Haut Medoc. I think it's quite interesting to have like an overview on the Bordeaux vineyard, which is quite complex area. As you said, Averys, the major part of the wines is Bordeaux. So a lot of you are already very keen on Bordeaux wines, so that's quite interesting. But anyway, it's always good to have a general overview. So first of all, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the 2020 vintage that just has been harvested, to have like a general information, and then explain you in a few points why is Bordeaux so complex and why the image that people is having from Bordeaux is so much complicated, and you know, before around all the terroir and all that, and also because of the right bank, the left bank, all these kind of things. And then we can go on the tasting of the wines, and obviously this is like an interactive conversation, so the idea is not just me being talking and you listening, so you are up to ask any question whenever you want. So it would be just my pleasure to answer about what you want to know.
Don't you worry, we'll throw those questions at you.
Okay, perfect. So about the 2020 vintage, so the harvest has just been fulfilled like last month. The year has been quite different than usual, obviously because of the COVID thing. You know, it's same as usual, same every year, everywhere. So the wine growers had to adapt their way of taking care of the vine all year long, of course. We had some hail in spring, so it's been kind of scary, mainly in the area of Saint-Emilion. But in the end, it was not very huge, so it didn't affect that much the vineyard, which is quite good news. Then we had a very dry beginning of summer. July was very dry. So the berries were starting to smarten and all that. But then we had some rain in August, so everything went better. And in September and early October were just wonderful. So wine growers was very happy because it was the best conditions ever for the harvests. So depending on the special situation, you know, that people having the masks for the sorting machines. In the vineyard, it was okay to get the grapes because it was outside, but everything inside was very regulated, a lot of controls, sanitary controls. To be sure that there is not any problem with this bloody virus in the grapes. And then, so everything went finally okay. And in terms of volumes, the average is correct, such as usual. The quality is fine. The colors are nice. The whites are really fresh, aromatic, acidics, a bit less than 2019 vintage, but still very fresh ones. The Merlot are just wonderful because they had been able to pick the grapes later than usual thanks to the weather. So it's really exciting for us because next year will also again be really nice moments to share about great bottles of wine. So then regarding the vineyard in general, well, you have the map here. So Bordeaux, in a few points, which will explain what is so complicated, is in terms of size of the vineyard, it's the third biggest in France after the southeast. But it's the first biggest one in terms of AOC, which is appellation of origin. So it's the first biggest producer. We have like around 6 million hectoliters per year of productions, which is around 8 million bottles. 800 million bottles, sorry. It's a very huge production every year. It's 65 different appellations. So out of them, like a little bit less of 40 appellations are very well known everywhere. But as you know, some appellations do only reds, some of them do red, white, rosé. So it duplicates the number of appellations, which is why there are 65 in total. So this is part of the complexity of the Bordeaux vineyard. So Bordeaux is mainly known for red wines because 80% of the production is red wine, but we also have a lot of great white wines, which are dry, some are sweets, we have rosé, we have crémant. So it's kind of very quite of complexity thing. Which is not really helping also in the complexity. Like Bordeaux is generally commonly called the 10,000 estates vineyard because there are a lot of small estates which are also added to the classified growth that will be more well-known, more famous all over the world. So this is obviously complicating things. And also, you know that on a lot of New World wines or other kind of vineyards from everywhere, you have some wines that just one grape. Bordeaux is all about blends. So in the blends, you have obviously different grapes which are mixed. On the red wines, we have as major grapes the Merlot, the Cabernet Sauvignon, and the Cabernet Franc, the major ones. On the whites, you will mainly have the Sauvignon white and the Semillon. But then, in addition to all that, you will have the complexity of the terroir, because Bordeaux is an oceanic climate, which is very well understood. When you see the map, you have the Atlantic Ocean there, and you have two rivers which are organizing the terroir of Bordeaux. You have the Garonne River, which is going there, and you have the Dordogne River on the other side. So this Garonne River is really separating what we call the right bank and the left bank wines. So the right bank is located on the right side of the Garonne River. So it is all this area here, where you have all the Cotes, you have the Saint-Emilion area, the satellites, you have all the Entre-deux-Mer. So Entre-deux-Mer is called that way simply because it's between the two rivers, the Garonne and the Dordogne. And then on the left bank of the Garonne River, we have all the Medoc and the Graves. So it's where you have the Medoc, the Haut Medoc, Saint-Julien, Pauillac, Saint-Estèphe, for the very well known, the Graves and the Pessac. So depending on the kind of side you are, you have different soils. So you dominantly have gravelly soils on the left bank, which is the best soil, let's say like that, for the Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is why you have many Cabernet planted in that area. When on the other side, on the right bank, you have mainly clay and limestone, which is the preference for the Merlot grape. So this is why the majority of the Merlot is planted on this area. But as we said before, Bordeaux wines is all about blend, which means that every estate is having different types of grapes planted in their domain. And it doesn't matter if they are right bank or left bank. They're not having only Merlot on the right bank and only Cabernet on the left bank. They are having both of them. And then they are doing a mixture every year with different kind of grapes to do the vintage they are presenting. So this is doing like a big complexity, because obviously because of the soils, you tentatively have more Merlot in the right bank wines, and you have more Cabernet in the left bank wines. But this is not a rule. It's just linked to the soil, but they are not obliged to do that. This is also why you have sometimes in the Medoc wines which are Merlot dominated, and the same on the other side. So this is quite complex, and this is what is doing the wonderful side of Bordeaux wines, because every year will be different. Every vintage will be different, because the blend will not be the same every year. It will depend on the quality of the grapes at any time. So if one year the Cabernet is just wonderful and the Merlot went a bit down, they will add more Cabernet in their wine. So it's really depending on the style. The estate is going to, the winemaker wants to give to the wine, and also depends on the berries themselves, because you can't do a good wine with bad berries. I mean, it's just the same every time. So I don't know if you have maybe a bit of questions about this general presentation of the vineyard, if you have any things you want to add on that, or if that's okay and just go on.
I was just going to sort of reiterate your point. It's such the blending side of Bordeaux is Bordeaux. You know, it's very rare to actually know what grapes are within. Actually, one of these does tell you on the back, and that's incredibly rare to see, because it changes every year. You're just not expected to know what the blend is. You can have an idea as to what might be the dominant grape, but it's more about starting to pick apart that more sort of understanding of each region and what styles that sort of area gives the wine, as opposed to the actual grapes itself.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really depending. Sometimes in some wines, where obviously in the vineyard you have Merlot and Cabernet, sometimes they do a 100% Merlot wine one year because they decided not to use the Cabernet because it was not mature enough the year they are doing it. So it's so special on that side. And also there is another thing I didn't talk about in the vineyard, is that you have the Petit Chateau wines and you have the classified growth wines. So the classified growth wines are really linked to classifications. So you have two different types of classification, one for Saint-Emilion, for Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Classé only, which is reevaluated every 10 years. So in this one, you have the Grand Cru Classé, you have the Grand Cru Classé B and the Grand Cru Classé A. And on the left bank, you have the 1855 classification, which is where they decided for the Paris, the Universal Exposition in Paris in 1855, they decided about the 73 wines that are going to enter this classification, and this has not moved at all since 1855. So these kind of wines from the 1855 classification on the left bank and from the Saint-Emilion one are the ones that you have under the en primeur wines, because every estate is able to sell wines en primeur, which means they put they start to commercialize the wine when it's not really finished. But generally, the famous en primeur campaign is really for the classified growth, not only for the Petit Chateau. So yeah, it's also adding even more complexity, because just people are just like, okay, so we have so many different wines, so many different appellations, so many different styles. And as you said, it's not written on the back label because it's changing like every year. And sometimes it's not really, people is not really able to write it because of the French law to write it exactly on the label if the percentage is under a certain type, something like that. So it's really quite complicated on that way.
Well, especially when you start to pick apart the intricacies of that hierarchy system in Saint-Emilion and all of the lawsuits that tend to arrive every 10 years when they try and change things. It's difficult to get your head around that as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the Saint-Emilion, it's really hard because you have the possibility to increase your level. Like, for example, in 2012, you have the Château Pavie and Château Angelis who were going to the A classification. But at the same time, you have some estates that are decreasing to the B or to the even no A or B classification. So it's much more complicated. On the left side, there is no changes. So they are part of the classification. Doesn't matter what they do or what they don't. This is not going to change. So this is also why you have the Cru Bourgeois thing on the left bank for the wines which are not in the 1855 classification. It gives them the opportunity to prove inside that area their superiority compared to other estates which are not part of any of them. This doesn't mean that these wines are not good at all. I mean, it's just different. I mean, you know, for entering the Cru Bourgeois and even some kind of classification, you need to get your tourism. You need to do a lot of investments in the major house and all that. And you know, in this kind of area, the more expensive things and the more important thing is the vineyard. I mean, the more important is to have good berries, to have good wine, to be able to do something interesting that people is going to enjoy. It's not really like the big house.
If you were somebody that was kind of completely new to Bordeaux, I know people, as you've mentioned already, it's quite complicated. You can easily get bogged down in information on vintages or on the different kind of classification. If you were somebody totally new to Bordeaux, would you approach it from, right, let's compare different grape varieties, or let's compare the different regions, or let's compare the different quality levels? What would your approach be to kind of simplify it as much as possible, perhaps for the new wine drinker?
Okay, so for the new wine drinkers, I would, I think that doing maybe, you know, the right bank and the left bank's comparison is also quite a good thing, because despite there is no rule, as I said before, on the right bank, you are majority Merlot wines. So generally Merlot is more fruity, you know, you are more on the black fruit, red fruit, really something like yummy wines. So for people who are not really into complex wines, it's more easy to drink right bank wines. On the left bank, you are having a major part of Cabernet. So the Cabernet is giving different type of fruits, but it also giving a lot more complexity. So this is the kind of one that are going to be maybe tougher to taste. So if you're not used to wines, I would say that you would better probably more like the right bank. Well, start with the right bank. This is also why for the tasting, we are always starting with the right bank and then to the left bank. So because of that, because they are generally smoother to taste at the very beginning. So yeah, I think that's a major part. Then, as you said, as it's not written on the bottle, it's really complicated to know what's inside. So when you see a bottle, you don't know if it's major Merlot or major Cabernet. So, and also some wines use wood, some others don't. So the wood is giving different tastes. It's giving sometimes some vanilla, some toffee. It will help also to keep a bit longer the wines. So I would recommend maybe to go, if you kind of imagine where you are on the vineyard, if you know where is Saint-Emilion, where are the Cotes, and you know you are right bank, and or which is Medoc, Haut Medoc, Pauillac, Saint-Estèphe, and all that, it's left bank. The more higher you are going in the vineyard, there you have the graph, the Pessac, Medoc, Haut Medoc, etc., etc. And the higher you are going in the vineyard, the tougher are the wines. So Saint-Estèphe, for example, if you are just a novice in the wines, I wouldn't recommend to go on the Saint-Estèphe. I love them, but it's really tough ones. And if you just start with them, it's going to be hard. So yeah. And then on the vintage, obviously every vintage is different. On every estate, it will be different, but you have like similarities. For example, today we are having 17 and 14 vintage. So the 17 vintage, it's been a hard vintage at different points. First, because it came just after 15 and 16, which were wonderful and very famous and very round and very easy to drink vintages. And then on the 2017, we had big frost and hail all around the vineyard. So a lot of estates haven't been able to do wines, and some which have been able to do so, it's because the berries restarted to grow, but later than usual. So you had less production, and according to that, and the bad weather during summer, and the berries starting late, at the very end of the latest time they could do the harvest, they did it. But sometimes the grapes wasn't mature as much as they usually do. So this is quite typical that in the 2017 vintage, for example, you have blends very different than usual, because the estates decided to use just a small part of the production of the vineyard, because they estimated that it was not good enough to enter in the wine. So they sometimes change completely the blend, sometimes they just reduce completely the volume to be able to do less but better quality. So 2017 vintage is a good quality vintage, but it's been very bad advertised everywhere because of that, because of the lack of sun during summer, because the frost which destroyed a lot of vines, a lot of plots. So, but if you take the wine we have today, so the Château Muret, you see on the nice pictures we have there, it's a castle from the 16th century. So this one has been in the family since the 1900. So it's the same owners for more than 100 years. It's really, well, the soils, like in this area, are more like chalky clay and red gravels, and you know, the ones you usually have in this kind of area, which is predominantly for Merlot wines. It's a 10 hectares vineyard. So they produce on average like 25 to 30,000 bottles a year. And they use sustainable agriculture. So a lot of estates in Bordeaux are doing that way, because doing organic wines in Bordeaux is very hard because of the climate. It's a humid climate in Bordeaux, so it's very propice to mildew, to all these kind of bacteria that are affecting the plots. So sustainable agriculture is really something easy for this kind of vineyard. So now this one is 12 months aged in French oak barrels. So this, you are going to have it in the wine. So the blend of the wine is 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. So they also have some Malbec in there. Malbec is not one of the major grapes of the Bordeaux vineyard, which is quite rare because Malbec is from the Bordeaux vineyard at the very beginning. But because of the phylloxera, all the Malbec has been destroyed in that moment. So they stopped doing it. All the plants they had have been destroyed. They exported it, and they stopped using Malbec in Bordeaux blends. So since 10 to 15 years now, they started again to replant the Malbec in their vineyard, and they are now able to include it in the blend they are using in the wine. So it's really interesting because Malbec, you know Malbec from Argentinian wines and from a lot of other kind of vineyards, but it's very interesting grape because it's giving really freshness and it's tough, and you know it's really interesting. So this wine is majority Merlot, 70%. Then you have the Cabernet Sauvignon, and you also have Malbec. So if you check the color is less intense than in other vintage due to what I'd explained about the 2017 vintage. Because when you have a lot of rain, obviously the grapes, the berries are much lighter. So when doing the vinification, it's really changing the color of the wine, and it's not tainting a lot, much less than the other ones. So this is why the color is sometimes lighter, but you still have the very nice like purple color on that one, which is really similar to general Bordeaux wines. On the nose, you really can have the candy fruit. For the candy fruit, you have some, I really do have the strawberry, the raspberry, all these kind of flavors, which are really coming from the Merlot dominantly. So it's quite interesting. And you can also feel a bit of warm and the vanilla hints you have from the wood. I mean, this is quite interesting when you are having wine aged in oak barrels, because depending, of course, on the kind of toast that the vineyard are using, the more toasty will be the barrels, the more flavor it will give to the wine. So we've been facing a few years ago a lot of wines with very, very hard wood flavors, because it was like fashionable to do it that way. Lately, they are really reducing the toasting to help having the flavors of the grapes being revealed in the wines. So
would you say that was because of maybe someone like Robert Parker, who did like very oaky styles?
Familiar. Yeah, absolutely. There was like a really fashionable period when the notes of the critics are always very important, even more on the classified growth segment. And a lot of people were trying to get notes from Parker, who was very famous. And Parker loves wines with a lot of wood. So people changed their way of doing wines to do that way. But it's kind of changing simply because when you use so toasty oaks, at the very end, you are not feeling such difference between the different wines, and you just feel the wood, and you just feel like all the wines are the same. So it's not that interesting. So I think that's why also people really started to, you know what, I want to do my wine this way. This is how I like it. So I want to do it that way. Never mind if I have wonderful critics. And just the idea about wine is to enjoy it. I mean, the idea is not that every wine is the same. You need to get differences between the different wines to be able to have diversity, simply.
Just to go back on what you were saying with the sort of what's known as the poorer vintages, I'm a huge fan of those cooler vintages because they're so much lighter and fresher on the palate. The tannins aren't anywhere near as aggressive. And they are far more approachable when they're younger. You know,
Absolutely.
Bordeaux is known for a wine that you need to age forever. But vintages like 2004, 7, 12, and 17, they're approachable when they're relatively young, and that beautiful sort of freshness to them.
Yeah, this is typically when you have like light vintages, the idea is really to enjoy them much earlier than you would do with big vintages. I mean, if you do open some Saint-Estèphe wine from 2015 or 16, you just drink it and you, wow, it's great, but it's so powerful. Just leave it for 10 other years. When you are having a 2017 vintage right now, you will have the freshness because it's still young. You still have the nice acidity, but you can really enjoy them right now. What happened with the 2007? The 2007, everybody was just saying, oh no, that's a bad vintage, just don't buy it and all that. And now everybody is just dying for buying a 2007. They can't, because there is no 2007 on the market anymore, because it's already sold out. And it's just a shame, because it's when you just taste it now, it's just wonderful, and it's only 13 years ago, so it's just great.
And especially with those class grows, the value in those poorer vintages is exceptional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pay less for more and drink it sooner. It's great.
So as per the taste, so let's see the typically what we said. We are really on the fruit. We have this really nice acidity. I mean, it's really fresh, because big hint. You have a tiny vanilla notes in the taste, which gives like a warmer taste. Lasts long. I mean, it's really good. I mean, this kind of wine, it's typically the kind of wine you can enjoy on an aperitif or something like that. Just not if you don't have to be like eating to drink it, because it's sometimes something which I understand it's hard for young people or people who's not really used to drink wine. When you drink Bordeaux wines just by themselves, you just say, oh wow, I don't really enjoy it, because I mean, it's not only Malbec with really hot fruit and all that. It's more complex. So generally Bordeaux wines are meant to be drunk when you during lunch, during dinner, mixing with food. But this kind of wine, I mean, for me, you can easily have it just like for an aperitif or something, just sharing a glass of wine, maybe not in the morning, right? But maybe starting midday or in the afternoon, and that's no problem at all. I mean, it's really charming. It's light, but you really have like a good structure, and it lasts long in the mouth. I mean, it's not really shorting right now. If you keep it in mouth, in the very middle, you still have other fruits that just come after.
I always think Bordeaux wines are an interesting one to do on blind tastings, just because people do tend to arrive to Bordeaux wines with a certain amount of their own kind of judgment or preconceptions, for example, taking into account the vintages, trying to include what knowledge they have, kind of dictating what they're going to think of the wine before they've even tasted it. And I think these two wines are such great examples of just tasting them kind of blind almost, and appreciating them for what they are, and then realizing the vintages and the variations in what people might think of those vintages if you're just reading about them online, for example.
Yeah,
would you tend to agree?
Yeah, it's true. I completely agree with that, because unfortunately a lot of we all are the same. I mean, when you see what you are drinking, you see the label, you see the appellation, you see the vintage, you saw the price, and just only with that, without having tasted the wine, just say, okay, no, this one isn't good, or this one is going to be hard, or this one is, you always have like an apprehension on the things, and you have a pretty much idea of what you think you are going to taste. And this is, as you said, very interesting when you just taste the wines. And it's something that usually we love to do exactly with the hot vintages, like you have the 2013, the 2007, the 17, because just people is just like, no, it's a 13, I don't want to taste it. Why? Not because it's a 13, but it doesn't matter. I mean, if you say, you do a blind tasting, as you said, and you just put it in the very middle, and people say, oh, wow, this one is great. Oh, this is a 2005, and you're just like, okay, just look at the label, and people are like, what? I can't believe you. It's not, that's not possible. I mean, it's the same, that sometimes I see people that say, okay, you know what? I love Bordeaux, but I hate Merlot. I said, so we're going to have like a kind of problem, because you have Merlot in 99.9% of Bordeaux wines. So it's kind of strange that you tell me that, but that people is really people, and I include myself, we are all having like an idea of thing. And this is why it's so interesting to do blind tastings, and even to compare different vineyards and even different countries. Because sometimes you think you are, for example, in Bordeaux, and you are, I don't know, you are in Spain. It's so interesting to do that. And it really means that there are, and that's the more important thing, is that you have wonderful wines everywhere. I mean, you don't have to buy a very expensive wine to have good wines. I mean, I prefer spending £10 and enjoying the wine. It's just having for lunch and just wow, this is matching really good with the meat I'm having, than spending, I don't know, maybe 150 or 200 pounds per bottle, and never say, well, yeah, the wine is really nice. Okay, yeah, it's nice. I'm not going to say it's not nice, but am I enjoying it more? I'm not sure. I mean, it's really depending on the circumstance you are having the wine and what you want to do with it. So,
I think if somebody else has paid for it, then you will enjoy it more.
Probably. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so then if you want, we can compare with the other one. So the other wine is from the left bank, the Château Muret 2014. Okay, so there you are on the left bank. You have it on the map. So the vineyard is located, as you see, on the very top of the Haut Medoc appellation, close to Saint-Estèphe. So as I said before, the more you are going on the top of the vineyard, the more generally the tougher are the wines, because the soils are really, it's always a big difference. So on this one, it's on the left bank, but you are located on the chalky clay plateau. So this is why, despite you are on the left bank, it's a Merlot dominated one. So on this wine, you are 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. So you have more Merlot, but it's closer than 50-50. It's you still have a lot of Cabernet in the wine. So the Cabernet, like I said, is going to give you a bit more complexity in the texture in the mouth, and it's also having helping the wines to be kept a bit longer. So I'm seeing a message if it's the same blend as the previous one. So no, on the first one you had 70% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Sauvignon and 10% Malbec. On that one you are 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. You don't have Malbec on that one. So Château Muret was, in the beginning, it was more of the largest estates in this area. It was like more than 100 hectares. and it's been completely abandoned. The house were completely were dropped and all that. So it's been taken back like 30 years ago, and they are not producing on only 25 hectares. So it's still big production. You generally have much bigger productions on the left bank than on the right bank. So on the Château Muret, they approximately produce around 100,000 bottles every vintage. So it's much more than the previous one. And the average age of the vineyards is 25 years old for the plots. So it's also on the sustainable agriculture. They actually have the Terravitis certification. You can see on the back label, which is like a higher. It's, you know, when you do sustainable and you tend to do like organic, but you don't have the organic classification. So you also have wood in 12-month oak barrel for this wine. And the 2014 vintage, in the comparison to the 2017 we had just before, it's been a very warm vintage. So the summer in 2014 was very hot. So we had a lot of high degrees. So this one is only 13.5, such as the one before. But 2014, sorry, it's the vintage when the Bordeaux wine started to have like 14.5 alcohol percent per volume, when usually Bordeaux wines are more between 12.5 to 13.5. So when you have hot temperatures, obviously you have more sugars concentrated in the grapes, which is giving more percentage of alcohol in the wines. So 2014 vintage, yeah, it was a vintage coming after 11, 12, and 13. 13 being one of the most famous in the bad advertising we were talking about before, because of the lighter part of the grapes this year. So 2014, after that, we're coming very warm with Merlot full of really fruit, black fruit due to the sun. So this is why you are having colors much more intense than you had in the other ones. So if you look at the 2014 vintage color, for 2014, it's already 6 years old wine. But you still have a nice color, and you have like an orange color which is starting on the very edge of the of your glass, which is saying that the wine is starting to evolve. And actually, when you smell the wines on the nose, you are having this kind of notes also. You have a lot of fruit in the nose. You feel it. You feel the alcohol, but you're also starting to smell like we have like animal nose, you know, when the wine is starting to evolve. So, and you also can, you get the wood also on the nose. You feel the vanilla notes from the oak barrel.
You can certainly notice that riper fruit characteristic. It's almost heading towards a slight dried fruit characteristic, whereas the first wine was very fresh, very vibrant, almost sort of floral in characteristic. Whereas, yeah, you could definitely tell the ripeness within the vintage, within the grapes, that's led to a more sort of powerful style of wine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's quite a big difference, madam. That's interesting to have both wines together, because they are really different kind of wines. I mean, for example, this second one, well, it's my personal taste, but I wouldn't drink it just alone. This one, I really need to have a meal with this one to really appreciate the flavors we are having, because even by the taste, you have these kind of animal notes you have on the nose, despite it's still, you know, you still have really nice acidity on the wines, but as you said, it's much less fresh than the first one. because it's older, simply it's older, and you have more Cabernet. The Cabernet is giving really more structure, and if you have less Merlot, you also have less red fruits on the palate. So this is also doing the difference between the two wines we have here.
What would be your ideal food pairing with either of the wines, but specifically with the 2014?
Well, the 2014, I'm kind of, well, it's quite a bit late right here now to do that, but I would perfectly imagine like a piece of meat, you know, on the barbecue or something like that, just having really, really only the meat with that, and that's just wonderful. And also this is pairing also very good with the sauce dishes, you know, the meat cooked with vegetables and all these kind of things. So so yeah, this for me, it's really pairing good with like kind of heavy food. I don't know what you think about between the two ones we tasted, which one you like the most, and you know, which kind of wines would you ideally drink tonight?
I'm edging towards the 14, but I still think the 17 is delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I'm on the 14 because I don't know, I really like the savoury notes that you get in the wine, the kind of more tertiary characteristics, and I just like that really savoury long finish that the 14 has. It's just very kind of, for me, it's a very nice classic example of Bordeaux done well, like not approaching it with the subjectivity that we're all guilty of applying to Bordeaux wines. I think out of all of the regions in the world, it's probably, like you said, the one that's the most effective to taste blind. But yeah, in terms of with food, yeah, I people know me. I would go for Comte.
Comte with everything, though, isn't it?
Comte works with everything.
If you've
But it
been
would
here,
work really well with this.
if you've been on every Zoom this week, you'll understand what Louise is saying. It's Comte
Or any tasting that I
way.
do, any food suggestions I do for any of the virtual tastings, Comte will feature on.
It's pretty much, what would you recommend with blank? Answer, Comte.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cheese is always very good pair for red wines. Also, I have to say that I love eating cheese with white wines because it's really giving so different flavors. I mean, the tannins on the red wines are like removing some flavors of the cheese. When you do with white wines, it really develops other flavors on the cheese you haven't noticed before. So it's just different ways, but very well, when we are able to do some evenings with friends and all that, I just love having some cheese, some grapes, some fruits with a glass of wine, and just sharing this moment with people. I mean, it's always just great way of pairing wine. I mean, cheese and wine is just wonderful. It's a winner.
Yeah, I completely agree. I normally would opt for a white over a red. I mean, especially with the kind of more fresh cheeses we tend to produce in the UK, as well as I suppose in France. Everything from Camembert was just so much better with a white wine than it is with a red wine. And white Bordeaux, we must of course mention that as a great way of pairing cheese with white wine. It's a good default to opt for.
Massively overlooked style, and they're delicious if you can find them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've asked quite a few other producers about this, and I think it's a very sort of topical thing when it comes to Bordeaux. But how is climate change affecting Bordeaux? I hear they're considering introducing port varietals into blends in the distant future.
A bit of Touriga Nacional.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, global warming is really affecting even more because when you have temperatures, like for example, today we had 20 degrees and sunshine, and it was like we were about being in spring, and that's really good on a personal way because you just enjoy being outside all day long. But on the vineyard side, it's not good because I mean, Vine is just feeling that it's spring already and it's going to start producing, and that's not good. I mean, global warming is quite hard. So what is happening is that it's affecting and it's changing the wines, because obviously if we are having hottest temperatures, the grapes are maturing earlier than usual. For example, in this year in Bordeaux, the Merlot started 2 weeks before the usual date. 2 weeks is just huge on the harvest time. At the very end, it finished at the same time as usual, simply because the weather was so nice that the vineyard left the Cabernet to mature a bit more and decided to harvest them at the very last time. But yeah, what's going to happen is that the harvests are opening earlier than usual, and they need to be very careful not to go too far. Because if not, if you go too far, the berries are starting to develop other flavors and things that you don't want to have in the ones you want to produce. In terms of grapes, well, I think that Bordeaux is, you have a certain type of grapes you are allowed to use in the Bordeaux blend, specific to the appellation. You can't use whatever you want. So you can't introduce a grape which is not allowed in the Bordeaux appellations. So this is not going to happen. What is going to happen is that they are starting to introduce again other grapes, like you have the Malbec, you have the Muscadel, and this kind of grapes that have kind of already been present in Bordeaux vineyard, but not very used. So they are starting to plant more on them, because they are also supporting this kind of weather. So this is, I think in that way, we are going to face some changes in the blends, maybe starting to use a bit more grapes that there was not used before, but a huge change, I don't think so. No, if not, or we are going kind of losing the specificity of our wines.
Yeah, there is always that risk, isn't there?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Again, it's always a treat and a delight to learn more about Bordeaux. I've been there many times, and every time I do, I fall in love with the wines all over again. And it seems like there is just an endless world of different styles of Bordeaux to continue trying. And hopefully for our customers, we've given you a little bit of an insight as to what you should try and explore next time. So whether you think you prefer Merlot or think you prefer Cabernet, whether you're more in favor of the left bank or the right bank, the warmer vintages, the cooler vintages, I think as Mimi said in the chat earlier, there's so much to learn and discover, but you'll be glad to know that the staff here at Averys drink so much Bordeaux that we can guide you in the right direction.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you have the chance that at Averys you have such a great range of wines. You have a lot of different Bordeaux wines from all these areas. So you have plenty of choices to taste very different wines, and every day will be like a different section. I mean, it's experience. So that's really great. You are in the right place to do that, and every people is doing just a great work, and really thank you for that. It's really nice to have this kind of companies that can help us to spread the variety and the quality of our wonderful vineyard. So that's great.